Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Shagalinku TV. As usual, I remain your host, Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari. And yes, thanks to everyone who's always joined us and dropped comments and feedbacks on our previous topics. Today we'll be looking at emergencies, what to do and what not to do. A lot of times when there are road accidents, you'll find um, people snapping pictures and posting real time rather than find a way of resuscitating or giving first aid to victims of road accident. And also, we just had the one that happened recently in Delta State or Anambra State, where a couple of movie crews, were on their way to location and they drowned and some were rescued, but people were busy snapping pictures, you know, arguing over what to do at every point in time. In fact, that was one of the reasons why we decided to do this topic today. And I've got with me a gentleman who will be doing justice to this topic. It's good to have David all the way from the United Kingdom. So I'll quickly just let David introduce himself and then we'll take it up from there. Hi, David. Welcome to Shagalinku.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Agbaso, and I'm a paramedic and first aider trainer. Okay. Yeah, it's nice to be here, and it's a good opportunity to share some of my experiences, both as a volunteer back in Nigeria and as also as a paramedic perspective as well. Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you, David, for that introduction. So let's jump right on it. Let's start with why is there pressure for people to do social media doctors, when issues happen? This is not just about even the actors or movie crew that drowned in the river in Anambra and Delta, but just generally, you see a pregnant woman who needs help. People are bringing out their phones to snap. You find a child who is convulsing. The first thing that everyone around should think about is either giving first aid or rushing such a person to the hospital. But the reverse is always the case. As someone who is in the field, what do you think is really wrong with us as people?
Yeah, from my own perspective as well, I think there's this drive to want to be the first person to give the information, or I think, or probably more of like a way of panic. Most people see emergencies, and because of poor knowledge, the best thing they can do is like either take a picture or just crowd the victim. It's more of like a cultural thing, which is wrong. But I think going forward from that, it's the first and most important thing. Most times when we see like an emergency, someone just collapsed or someone drowned, or the first thing is safety first. You need to make sure that it's safe for you because you are trying to help, and it will be of no use when you trying to help end up being the victim at the end of the day. So rather than just standing there snapping picture, you could try and get help by calling, shouting, anyone get help, anybody around, you understand. So take for example, if someone should collapse like in the middle of a street, the first thing to do is to get help. If someone can come with a vehicle to move the person, and then the next thing is this person needs oxygen. Like rather than crowding and forming a crowd, you even thereby limiting even the amount of oxygen this person is even going to get, because this person is not breathing adequately. The first thing you should do is, if it's safe for you to proceed, like there's no like oncoming vehicle, because take for example, someone collapsed at the middle of the road, you just can't run into it, because if there's a vehicle coming, it could still knock you down. So given that instant, your safety is priority, and someone collapsing at the middle of the road is not safe for you to go and respond, even if you are trying to help. So the first thing is all vehicles have to stop, and then you could move forward, try to get that person to somewhere safe away from the road, so two people can go and pick up this victim and take them to like a safer place. Then the next thing you want to do is this person breathing more? So try to look around. If the person's chest is moving, that's like a very clear way you could tell if someone is like breathing. Okay. So after checking for the breathing, the next thing we want to do is this person bleeding from anywhere? Can you see any blood? Or you know, when accident happens, most times that's the first thing you always see, like they always like some signs of like bleeding or fracture. You should try and like apply direct pressure with any clean cloth or material you can get around, because when we talk about first aid, it's more of improvising, trying to like help with the best way you can. So after we've moved from it, the person is breathing, we move down to the bleeding part. So try to like see if there's any like obvious bleeding out, try to like put direct pressure directly to it. That's not like a time you should start maybe pouring water or something. That's not going to help, because the person is losing blood. So the first thing you do is to apply direct pressure to it. And of course, remember, we've called for help, which is like the first and most important thing, because we need people to come to help this person down to the hospital, which is like the end route that this victim is going for. So you're only just there trying to like save the day, try to do the best you can by ensuring the person is, number one, breathing. Try and like look around. Remember, do not put your hand in the person's mouth, because they might be semi-conscious and then could like use their teeth in ripping your hand off. So that's still not safe for you. Remember, safety is like the first thing we talk about. So yeah, if I would just go back and reiterate, so the first thing is safety. The other thing is look for signs of this person being breathing. This person is not breathing. Try to remove any tight fitting clothes like jewelries or anything that is strangulating them. Try to clear the place for air to come into this person more. Try to look for any signs of obvious bleeding anywhere that you see any blood coming, and then apply direct pressure to it. And I think that would be saving a victim more, and you'll be doing more good rather than holding your phone and snapping pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's even come to a few emergencies that can occur. Sometimes parties, birthday parties, wedding parties, even when they have planning committees, or a group of friends who they are busy buying ashwebi, nice food and all of that. They are also no one is trying to remember and say, who is pregnant might just want to start labor. Maybe someone who is asthmatic, or something might just happen. No one wants to envisage. It's not in my party that such things will happen. Is it our mindset, or don't we also think that first aid, whether at gatherings, whether at home? Growing up, first aid was what we were taught. Our teachers will teach us a few things that we'll have in the box: it's cotton wool, and it goes on. What people are not paying or think they will never happen.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So, if I get your question quite well, it's more of like, why do people are really very uncompliant more with safety and procedures when they're having a large event? Yeah. So, I think firstly, I would give an instance mostly. So most times we plan for food and all that, and then we don't even think about what happens if something goes south. So the first way, what I would actually think is the problem mostly is this, God forbid, is not going to be my portion mentality kind of thing. So most times we always reject and say, oh, God forbid, it's not going to happen. Someone will be like, what if fire comes out from you? And we're like, why you be thinking that kind of evil thing in your heart, God forbid. So the first thing is to assume that in every gathering, there would always be an emergency. So the best way is envisaging something before it happens, which say, oh, somebody should fall down for me. What's going to happen? We're all gathered here. I will give an instance during, I think, the coming election, and there was like a campaign in the stadium, and I know there were like some volunteers, first aiders, and Red Cross that were like around. But in that whole stadium, there was not one single AED. So I was thinking, like, if somebody goes into cardiac arrest here, what is the chances that this person is even going to survive? So all those, God forbid, mentality, it would not happen, I think is the first problem that comes along with this mindset of not being prepared. Number two is poor knowledge. Most people don't have this knowledge about what to do, and that's the purpose of why we're having this talk today, just like to equip you with some basic things you can do and you can help when these kind of cases happen. So there's the poor knowledge, because things like first aid are supposed to be taught in from primary school, even as in secondary school. There's supposed to be this awareness, and even in organizations, staffs are supposed to be trained on basic emergency. What happens if there's a fire, if somebody collapse, how to check for pulse, how to do CPR. So stuff like that. Poor training as well is also part of it. So I would say that the first thing that makes most people act in this very uncompliant way is this mentality of it's not going to be my portion, and then with poor knowledge as well. And that's the basic reason why we are here today. So hopefully we'll be able to learn some basic things we can do and how we can provide help rather than just making the situation more worse. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So I got a few messages here. This one is from Oche Courage, and it says, greetings, everyone. And he came back a second time and says, great topic. Thank you so much, Oche Courage. You can join us live. We're streaming live on Shagalinku YouTube page and Shagalinku Facebook page. The videos will still be here after the program for you to watch and contribute. And our guest today is Mr. David, all the way from the UK. Okay, so can we touch a few things about emergencies and how people need to prepare for such? You know, what are some of the emergencies people need to prepare for? And particularly, we'll come back to CROP, but what are a few emergency situations people need to prepare for? Because, like you said, this God forbid mentality, it's really, really something that's doing a whole lot of Nigerians and even Africans, you know. People even in the plane, you know, you find where the air hostess and tenth time turn off your phones. You still find people who will not turn it off or landing, you know. So I don't know, what are some of the emergencies you think people need to know, and then we'll take it up from there.
All right. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. So I think the first and most important kind of the common most emergency people need to know about is when somebody collapses. So how to do CPR, which is very important, because you standing there and that person, that time you have is the best chance this person has to live. So the first thing is, what can you do when someone collapses, when someone is not breathing? And the second thing I would also like to touch as well, another very common emergency is, what do we do when somebody is bleeding? Because these are time critical conditions whereby if you don't act, the person could the difference between this person improving when he gets to the hospital is just you standing there. So the first one is, if somebody should collapse, there can be 1,001 reasons that are responsible for someone collapsing. So the first thing is, what do you do? Somebody collapse, you rush down there. Of course, safety is first. Is it safe for you to proceed? Hope your own safety will not be compromised. If your safety is being compromised, I would advise you should not proceed, because you're already trying to help and will be of no need. But if it's quite safe for you, the first thing you go down there is to tap this person by the shoulders and see if this person is responsive, because someone can just collapse. Maybe they're tired, not able to move. So not everybody who collapses is actually in that state of arrest. Okay, so it's to tap this person by the shoulders. If you can call the person by name, if you know the person's name, you could call their name. Hey John, hey John. If you are not aware of this person's name, you can say gentleman or guy, or you could just tap and shout just to get a response. So if you tap and shout, this person is still not responding to you, the next thing you want to do is to check for pulse. And a very easy and quick way is to check for the carotid pulse. So just to reach out to their neck just a little bit. If you check the Adam apple, you just move a little bit either to the left or to the right. You could just feel for pulse for at least 5 seconds and see if the place is like a bit beating. So if you can't feel anything like hitting your hand or so. This person does not have a pulse. So it's so obvious that the person is in cardiac arrest. The next thing you want to look for is this person breathing? Like, can you see chest rise and fall? Is there any sign that you could see that you could tell if this person is breathing? If the answer is no, then what you should do is to get your hands interlocked in the center of this person's chest and start doing what we call chest compressions. So what the guidelines says is that for an adult, if you were the only one present when this thing happens, you should do 30 chest compressions and give 2 breaths. So most people will be like, how do I compress? How do I where do I place my hand? So the best way to place one is like, if you look at the nipple line given for mostly for guys, if you trace in between, if you draw a straight line between the 2 nipple line, you could place the heel of one of your palm in the center of that, between those 2 lines, and then interlock with your other hand to get a firm support, and then straighten your shoulders and then deliver 30 chest compressions. So mind you, this chest compressions is not all about just pressing this person's chest. You're not trying to compress them, even if it sounds it's compression. So what you are trying to do is you're just trying to help their heart beats, just a way of like supporting the heart. So you make sure you push hard and fast. Okay, so you're not just going fast. So we're pushing hard and fast, but we're looking at giving about 120 compressions in a minute. Okay, so how to do this? Most time you don't have to put a timer in your mind, just deliver as fast as you can. So 30 chest compressions, and then we could try and see how we can open up this person's airway. Okay, because when people collapse and they go unconscious, there's this way the tongue falls back and then blocks this person from breathing. So what we do is a very simple maneuver. We just use 4 fingers to kind of tilt the head a little bit back, and then use 2 fingers to lift up the chin. Okay, so if you do that maneuver, which we call a head tilt and a chin lift, you would see that automatically the tongue just goes off from the airway, and then this person is able to have a bit of air exchange. Okay, so given with the change of things, COVID, we're not sure of people's the risks of what people have, different infections. I wouldn't advise you do a mouth-to-mouth breath. People call it mouth-to-mouth respiration. So you don't do that actually. So you could get a clean handkerchief from your pocket or anything that can be like a barrier between this person's mouth down to your mouth, because of course you don't know them. Even if they are like your close relatives, it's not advisable you breathe into somebody's mouth, like blow into somebody's mouth directly, because of the risks of different infections. Okay, so you could actually fold an handkerchief, put it as a barrier, and just give 2 breaths to this person. Okay, so you don't have to blow with your whole all the air. You just blow the air just the way as you breathe out. You don't have to gather so much and blow. It's just supporting them with a bit of oxygen, and then you go back again. You do 30 compressions, you give 2 breaths. Okay, until either help comes and you guys are moving to the hospital, or maybe an advanced medical person comes to take over from you. So this is a very good way we can actually help someone who has fallen down and collapsed and does not have a pulse and is not breathing. Okay, so it looks like a very, very big grammar, like all I've been saying, but a very simple way to try and get this thing is safety first. So S is the first word. So somebody collapses, is it safe? Can I proceed? Am I able to help this person? So somebody collapses and it was due to either they were fighting with 2 persons and the other person is still holding a cutlass and standing there. I wouldn't advise you go. It's a common sense thing, because you could end up being macheted. So your safety is already compromised at that instant. So you are only trying to help here. You are not trying to get involved. Okay, but if it's very safe for you to proceed, so safety first. If it's safe, you proceed. The next thing you want to do is this person responding? Is he responding at all? If you tap him, you shout. Is he responding? Is he talking back to you? Is he saying, stop hitting me? Is he saying, oh, why are you shaking me? If you go there and you tap and this person actually responds, that's like a good sign that it was more of like either it's like a fainting episode. So you won't be doing that chest compression on somebody that has answered you. It means this person still have a bit of response. So then you can actually find out what happened from this person or try to sit them up. Okay, But the critical case here is when they are not responding to you, even after tapping and shouting at them, they are still not responding to you. The next thing you want to do is to check if they've got any pulse at all. And I told you, like, you could use either the left or the right side, just a little bit above this thing we call the Adam's apple. Yeah, there's this big swelling under, especially for men, it's very prominent. You can actually see this thing. Yeah, you could just place your hand a little bit beside it, either to the left or to the right. It's present in both sides. You just put your hands there for about 5 seconds and see if it's actually beating. So if you cannot feel anything between 5 to 10 seconds, it means this person does not have any pulse. So what you want to do is to place the one heel of your hand in the center of the chest and then try to interlock with the other one just to get a firm support, and then start to push hard on the chest to help the heart beat. Okay, so we're doing that 30 times, remember, and then we are giving 2 breaths. So we do 30 times, we do 2 breaths until help comes, or a senior person which is like more advanced comes to like take over from you. But it's quite very sad that in Nigeria there's really no much of an emergency response service, unlike down here in the UK. If somebody collapses and someone starts doing CPR, there's a likelihood that in 10 to 15 minutes an ambulance will turn up, and then you are free to like go, they will take over from there. But in these instances, the only help you can get is either somebody is coming to provide a vehicle to move the person to the hospital. Okay, so that's like the more of the help you can get. So you just have to keep on pushing, giving breath to this person until you arrive at the hospital. Okay, so that being said, the second very critical thing that we also think about too is either someone that is bleeding very profusely. So you see someone, either they were fighting and the next thing someone stabbed the other person, or someone just used a mattress to remove somebody's hand and you see blood pissing out. So what can you do to help in that kind of situation? Because it's a life-threatening condition. So first of all, safety is also still there. If it's not safe, you don't have to proceed. And the next thing we can do is to get a clean cloth, okay, and apply a firm and direct pressure directly over the wound, okay? So the best thing you can always get is either, most people would use the victim's shirt, or they would use maybe like a piece of cloth. It's advisable that it's always good to use something clean, okay, so you don't end up introducing more infection. But most times, because it always happens in an environment where it's unpredictable and you don't get the whole best thing, the best thing you can do is to get like a good piece of material cloth and then put it directly on the wound and then apply a very firm pressure. So you're going to apply that pressure there for a long time, say up to about 10 to 15 minutes, until you notice that the blood has kind of like reduced, okay? But there are still some cases whereby even with that direct pressure, it's still not going to stop the bleeding. So what would I advise, especially if it's places like the hand, the legs, like this long part, is to apply direct pressure and elevate that part a bit up. So if this is my hand and this is like a piece of cloth and I'm bleeding profusely from this hand, I can apply direct pressure firmly to it and then lift it above the level of the chest. Okay, so we're just elevating the hand upwards. So what it does is just to prevent more blood from being supplied and then going all out. So we just apply direct pressure and then elevate the hand up. That's a very good way. Then the third way also that we can also help too, especially for kind of like severe bleeding, when people have like accidents and then they see that there's one leg that is out, it's bleeding out very profusely. It's something that is really not encouraged anymore because of risks of many people not being able to do it. Is what we call applying like a tourniquet. So it's more of like what people do. You see people tying pieces of cloth on injuries. But the first thing you should note is, if you are going to be doing that, the bleeding has to be something quite very severe, like a whole leg going out and the blood is just pouring all out like a tap. So what you do is, you can only put it in places like the hand and the leg. You can't put it over the neck because you end up strangulating this person. You can't put it on the head. So we only put it in places like the long hands, the legs, okay? So what we do is we just go a little bit above it and then we tie, like you could get a piece of cloth or something that is not too slim. So the rule is more of You can't use something that is so tight, like it that is constricting. Okay, you need to use something that at least, even if it's tight, your one finger can still go through if you put your hand on that. So it's not like a kind of rubber band kind of thing, like you put in the person's hand and kind of, and the hand, and you're not able to, like, you see that there's this tight band, so it's just putting it tight, but at least one finger can go underneath if you put one finger underneath. Okay, so we put that tight above the part the above the part that is bleeding. Okay, and then what we do is that we try and elevate the leg a bit or elevate the hand a bit, and you should get that person to the hospital as fast as possible. Okay, so there was a message that popped up, and someone was like, what if it's the neck that it's affected? So if it's something like the neck that is being affected, we cannot put like a tourniquet on it. Okay, so what we do is get a very thick cloth, place it directly to the wound, use the other hand, apply pressure to it, and just leave it down there for like 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're encouraging clotting. Okay, so the body has a way of healing itself. So once there's a cut, there is a clot that begins to form just to help the to seal up the part that is bleeding out. Okay, so you putting that direct pressure with a piece of cloth, you're only just trying to encourage that clot from being formed and then reduce the level of the bleeding. Okay, so remember, do not put a tourniquet. Okay, do not tie around the neck. We can't do that for the neck, we can't do that for the head. Okay, then another very vital thing is, what if somebody is being stabbed to the neck, or like with a pen or with a knife, and you get there, should I remove it? So it's advisable not to remove whatever is still impaled in the injuries. Take for example, two people were fighting, and then the other person dropped maybe either a cutlery or a knife or something deep, and then just stab it on the person's neck or to whatever part that the object is being impaled on. The first and the most important thing you should do is do not pull that thing out, because as long as the thing is down there, it's helping to put pressure, and it's because if you take it out, it's just like a tap. Okay, so if there's a tap and you put your hand underneath the tap, you would see that the water that comes out is reduced, but once you take your finger out, you see the water just pulls all out. Okay, so if there's an object impaled, you do not take out the object. So if either it's a stab to the neck or a stab to the stomach or whatever, do not take that object out. Okay, so most people would advise that you try to stabilize the object, but what I would advise is that leave the object the way it is, because you trying to go there to toy with it or try to move it around, you can end up either displacing it, and it can do more damage, can cut out maybe a major artery and then cause more bleeding. So if you see such object like that, try not to take out the object. Okay, so at that moment, the object is actually helping to apply that direct pressure. All you should do is to just try a little bit, if you can get to stabilize that object, not to move the best way you can. But if you know you are going to be moving the object from side to side, leave the object the same way it is, and then try to get that person straight to the hospital. Okay, then another very common case we can actually see is most people that have asthma attack, and then they just collapse either in a gathering, or you see them starting to gasp for air, like trying to breathe so fast, and then that's a very, 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 very important kind of emergency. So in that kind of case, most times the best thing to do is, most of them would have their inhalers in their bag most times. So you could easily see them reaching out to either their bag or trying to put their hand in their pocket. So the first thing is to try and check around if you can see their inhaler. Then try to give the person lots of space to be able to breathe, because if you crowd them, the little air they are trying to still get, you end up taking it from them. So try to make sure that the place is as free as possible. There's no much persons crowding that person. Try to clear the place. Try to remove any tight clothes that is kind of strangulating, or tight jewelries to that person, and then quickly try to get help as well by calling, shouting, trying to get the vehicle to move that person straight up. Okay, then also a very, very common emergency too that we get is people that are convulsing, or what we call seizure. Okay, so there's a lot of myths that surrounds this condition, whereby most people think that it's something spiritual and you should not go close to them, because if what is coming out from their mouth actually touches you, it's most likely going to make you epileptic as well. So all those are like myths. Okay, so they're really not true. It's just a kind of a story that people have, they just keep passing on from one generation to another, that is really not like, there's no medical explanation that can explain that, or science are not able to explain that more. So it's just more of like, when you see that kind of thing happening, is what happens is that there is kind of like an overfiring in the person's brain, which is like manifesting in terms of this jerking movement. Okay, like we all know, the brain is what controls our movement and all. And then it's just like sometimes when your radio is playing and there's a bit of disruption, you hear this squeaky noise that just goes like, so it's just more of like everything is like, yeah, so that's what happens. It's just more of like there's a problem in the brain, and then the whole body is just manifesting something different. You see them jerking up, from their mouth, you could see saliva drooling out. You could see some of them, they could defecate, they could urinate on their body. Okay, so in that kind of case, the first thing that happens is try not to put any spoon in their mouth, or try to put your hand in their mouth. It's a very wrong practice. Most people will be like, oh, put something in their mouth so they don't end up. So if you're trying to do that, you can end up causing more harm to that person by making them injure their mouth, or you could end up even putting something down that could even block their airway and prevent them from breathing. So the first thing to do is, if you see somebody seizing, try to assist them down if they're like maybe on a chair or somewhere high, so they cannot, so they don't fall down from that kind of place and then end up injuring their head and dying from something like that. Okay, so try to get them on a flat surface. Okay, try to remove things like necklace, any constricting thing that can strangulate them. Try to clear the area from chairs or broken bottles or things that could end up like injuring them. Remember, do not put fire to do not put fire under their feet, because I think there's a part, or like I think there's an area in Nigeria whereby people see, you see them trying to burn the child with fire and all that. So that's a very wrong practice most times. So what you should do is trying to make the place safe for this person, removing things that would obstruct this person. Okay, and then once the seizure stop, you put this person in what we call the recovery position. Okay, so there's not really much I can demonstrate from my end, but a simple way to explain this recovery position is kind of like placing one hand like underneath their head just to support their head, and then tilting the head a bit. So what this does is it just helps them, in case they are trying to vomit or something, they can just pour out from their mouth, rather than them taking this vomit or anything down to their airway and then obstructing it. So just slide one of their hands under their jaw, and then try to see how you could place them more on their left side. Okay, so at this position, it's a very good position whereby if there's any secretion that's going to come out, it's going to just draw all out from the side of the mouth. Okay, right. So another thing too, which is very very important, is this drowning. Given like the recent incident that happened with a very popular Nollywood star, may so rest in perfect peace. Okay, so in drowning, most times safety is like of priority. So of course, if you can't dive, if you can't swim, you have no need trying to go close to the water. Okay, so you should try and call for help. That's the first part. You could shout, draw people attention to it, and then you could get people that are very experienced in swimming, especially those that live in the riverine area. They could try to get into that water, try to bring this person out. Okay, so once this person is out, the first thing we do is to try and check if there's any signs of life. Okay, such as, are they breathing, do they have a pulse? Okay, so it's also the same way somebody goes unconscious, the same thing we also do. So if they're not breathing, they don't have a pulse, we start what we call CPR. Okay, so we try to open up their shirt a little bit. Of course, you are not trying to expose them, like, of course you have to maintain their dignity, not like you just rip off their whole clothes off. But if it's something that is like a security area, you can always do that. Okay, so put your hands on place the heel of your hand on the center of the chest. Either you are left-handed or you are right-handed. You could place your hand that is more dominant on the chest, and then interlock with your other non-dominant hand. Okay, and then try to push 30 times and deliver 2 breaths. Remember, you can't do a mouth-to-mouth breath, so because of risk of infections. So if you have a clean cloth, if you have a barrier that can prevent you from having this direct contact with their mouth, you could place it over their mouth and then try to give 2 breaths to them. And of course, once help comes, this person should be on their way to hospital. Okay, so these are like some easy life-saving procedures you could do when someone falls and is unconscious, or somebody is bleeding, or someone's having a seizure or an asthmatic attack. Okay, so some of the wrongful practices that we do is like somebody collapses and we go there to pour them water. It's not actually kind of helpful to them, because if the person is actually in cardiac arrest, that water would do nothing. So you could pour a whole river on the person and they still would not respond to you. So the best thing you can always do is this person responding? Is he responsive? Can he respond to your tapping? Can he respond to your shouting? Is their airway clear? Is there any secretions in their mouth? If there's any secretion in their mouth, mind you, do not put your hand in their mouth to try to clear it out, because if that, you could get your hands chopped off with their teeth unknowingly, or you could end up pushing it down. Okay, so the best way you could do is to put them in the head, teeth, chin lift position, which I explained that if you use four fingers to just a bit push this head a bit backward, not really pushing like breaking their neck. So just push a little bit backward, and then using 2 of your index and your middle finger to lift up the chin. So it's more of like what you do when you are drinking water. You see, you always go a little bit like this. So it's just tilting their head and lifting up their chin with your 2 hands. And this is a very simple maneuver that helps to push the tongue back, make sure their airway is open, and then you could check if they have a pulse. If they don't have a pulse, then you could start doing chest compressions. You do 30, and then you give 2 breaths until help comes, or this person is making his way down to hospital. Right. Yeah.
Thank you very much, David. For those joining us now, you can also drop your comments. I've been seeing a lot of comments in the box. Drop your comments for our guest. David is here all the way from the United Kingdom. David, Mike Eze says, so there's nothing one can do to stop the seizure at that point in time. You take this, and then another person, Joe, says, what if it's a gunshot wound, maybe at the stomach? We could tie this Joe's question with, I was going to ask you all this while that a lot of times why people don't also render first aid, maybe during accident issues or gunshot wounds or bleeding generally, is because even when they do all of that and they rush the person to the hospital, doctors or hospitals don't agree. They say the person has to collect, bring police report first and all of that. And the person is unconscious or bleeding. And many times it's Good Samaritans that risk their life to bring these people to hospitals. So the burden now lies on that who's going to do this. When you get to the police station, trust them. They'll start asking you very relevant questions. How did you know the victim? Are you sure you are both not armed robbers? Blah blah blah. So this turns people off. But let's take the first one, then you will come to Joe. This
Okay,
one
yeah.
says, so I guess you got that right.
Yeah, very well. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Yeah, so like I explained before, so there's really nothing you can do to stop the seizure, given as you are not like a trained personnel. Okay, so what happened is that once they get to the hospital, they do give them drugs that stop the seizure. So the seizure is just a manifestation of the whole thing that is happening in the brain. So there's really nothing you can do. But the best thing you can do is trying to make the surrounding safe enough for them, because most people who die from seizure, most times they don't even die because of the seizure, because the seizure is just the body's manifestation of this jerking, shaking, which would last like 5 to 10 minutes and then stops. Okay, so you can't stop it, and it's not advisable to stop it, because if you are trying to hold them, you end up doing more harm, because the body is shaking and you are trying to hold them. So that either you end up in more of like breaking most of their bones, because something is jerking forcefully and you can't interfere in between. Okay, so the best thing you can do is clear the environment, remove anything that can strangulate them from the seizure. Try to see how you can open up their airway by the head stitching leaf so they can breathe more. Try to clear the environment, open windows so they can get air. That's like the best thing you can do for them, and then they should be on their way to hospital. Okay, because given you are not more of like a trained medical personnel, you can't really administer any drugs, because there are drugs that are being given to stop the whole stuff. So those drugs would help to relax the muscles, and then the whole seizure would stop. So at that best point in time, the only role you can play for someone having a seizure is to make sure that the environment is clear, make sure that they are not in any position whereby they can fall and hit their head, or end up maybe even falling into maybe things like fire close by. Because there was a very sad case of someone, I think he was a bus conductor, that had a seizure while he was I think he was standing by the side of the door, and then the next thing that happened was that was how he fell off, and then he smashed his head on the floor and died. So at that given point, it was not even the seizure that even killed him, it was because of the position he was. So the best thing is to try and make sure that the place is safe for them, they are not in any place that can cause harm, and then try to make sure that they are getting enough oxygen, like there's good ventilation, they're not being crowded, they're not wearing like a necklace or maybe a tie, because sometimes it can happen in the office, maybe wearing a tie and having that forceful jerk. So that can actually strangulate them. So try to loosen up things, clear off things that can affect their airway. Remember, do not put any spoon in their mouth. Do not put anything in their mouth. Don't put any finger in their mouth. Just clear the environment. Remove things like chairs, like table, things like, even if they, like, sometimes even maybe, like, if for example, let me say it's happening in a house, they could maybe be in the kitchen or something. Try to remove things like hot object that can easily fall off and then pour on them. So that's the best thing you can do, and try to get them to a place where there's much oxygen. Okay, and overall, the best thing too is like trying to get help too, because in all you are doing, the hospital is the end point for these people. So the earlier you get help, or somebody to come and help you, the better for this person, because you're only trying to just help here, right? There's really no much things you could do to recover them from it. Okay, so that's the answer to that question, if you got me right. Then the second part, someone was talking about a gunshot to the stomach, that what do someone do? So going to the stomach, the first thing that's going to happen is that you would see that there will always be an entering and an exit wound. Okay, so when the bullet goes all around, you see that it might be like a very small opening, and then when you look at from the back, you see there's a very like wide, it's quite very wide, and the exit wound is quite very large. So the best thing you could do is still the same thing you can do. Get like a padded cloth, apply direct pressure to the stomach a little bit. You're not trying to like push down on the stomach. Okay, so you're just trying to like put that pressure to reduce the bleeding. But there are some cases whereby if they have like a gunshot wound and then their whole intestine is out, you could see that everything is all out. So in that kind of situation, you cannot be applying direct pressure down to the whole thing. So it's advisable not to touch any of these parts that I add. Do not try to push it back inside. The best thing is just to try and make sure that this person is breathing, and try to get this person as fast as possible to the hospital. So call for help in this kind of situation. So there are two cases giving these gunshot wounds to the stomach. Okay, so the first one is if there is no sign of maybe their intestine out, or there's any organ protruding out, what you can do is to get like a clean cloth and then just place it at the entrance of the wound, just to like a bit prevent blood from like escaping all out. Okay, just try to like put that little bit of pressure. Okay, not this great pressure, because you'll be pressing too much down on the abdomen. So put direct pressure, get help, and they should be on their way to the hospital. Okay, if the whole intestine is out, everything is all out, do not try to push it back inside. Do not try to take out any object. If it's like a stab, or there's like an object that is still pointing out, try not to take it out. So what you should do at that moment is make sure that the person is like breathing, and then try to get help to get to the hospital. Okay, there's really little or nothing you can do at this given point, given that either the knife that is there or the object is still trying to help to control the bleeding, because if you take it out, it bleeds out more. If you leave it in, there's a little bit of bleeding coming out from it, but it won't be as much as when you take out that object. Okay, so I think that should be the answer for that. And then the third question, I don't know if you can remind me, Manuel, what was the...
I'm trying to look for it. Okay, but I got one as well. Okay, so let me take a few comments and we'll come to that. So this is from Boitemelo, and it says, thanks for today's session. I'm watching from Botswana.
Thank you.
Hello. And okay, so I've seen the other question. It says, my question is, when one is driving, happens, what is the next thing one should do?
Okay. All right, thank you very much for this question. Okay, so this is like what we get every day back home. So you see people are driving, there's like a collision. So the first thing to do when this kind of thing happens is it safe for you to proceed? Are they like any upcoming vehicle? Or it could be that you're also like involved in the accident, because there are some instances where people are being involved and then they are not so injured, they can still provide help to the victim. So the first thing that's going to happen is, when this kind of situation happens, is to look around. Is there any bleeding from anywhere that is very severe, like it's just sprouting out? If you can find any bleeding, the first thing you should do is to apply direct pressure. So even if there's like an accident that happens, it's not everybody that will come down with the same injury. So people may be having, like, you see their head are like scattered on the floor, which you cannot do anything about. They are more of like as good as dead. You see that there's some people that are shouting like, help me, help me. So when you go there, someone that is shouting, help me, is able to breathe, because if the person cannot breathe, the person won't even be shouting, help me, okay? So what you should do is just to look around, see if there's any like blood coming out from anywhere, try to tear out a piece of cloth, try to place direct pressure, and try to give them like reassurance, like, okay, relax, I'm here to help. And because most times out of panic, they end up breathing too fast, and then you see that they're bleeding even more. So try to reassure them. And of course, your safety should always be a priority. Remember, even when the place is safe, even as you are still doing that, you should also make sure that it's still safe for you to continue. Okay, so control any obvious bleeding by applying direct pressure. Try to see if they are breathing. If they are not breathing, try to like open up their airway by doing a head stitch chin lift, like I explained before. And of course, help should be on his way, trying to get into. Then also, there's also a very common part whereby you see people's leg, like this fracture, like you see their legs like very distorted. You cannot even fathom how it is. It's just very disorganized. So what I would advise is try not to straighten the leg, so you leave it the same way it is. And what we do is that we try to improvise by what we call splinting. So if you can get any improvised stuff, like maybe like a straight rule or something, like something that is quite very straight, you could use in supporting both sides, and then just try and look for something that you can use to like to keep it in that same positioning. Okay, so try not to straighten it out, because you may end up doing more damage. And then also a very, very crucial thing is that when people have an accident too, you don't try to stand them up most times, because out of goodwill, we're always trying to help. Somebody just fell down from like maybe 2-step or 2-story building. You see people go there, they just carry them up. So it's really a very wrong thing to do, because most times they must have actually either breaking or they must have broken their spine, and then when you try to get them up, you may end up maybe completing the whole thing. Okay, so in that same part whereby they are being laid down, you should just try and call for a more experienced person, like more for like help. Okay, and then try to make sure this person is breathing and then there's no obvious bleeding. Okay, so those are the two priority things you should always look at in every emergency. Is this person bleeding out, and is this person breathing? So those are the two key things that you can always do, and that's the thing that you can always help. And those help are quite very crucial, because even if you do carry them up or rush them up, if you don't control that bleeding, if you don't make sure that they are breathing, you would not be able to deliver a live person down to the hospital. So that's very, very crucial. So I would reiterate just for for emphasis purpose. So if you are in the midst of a road traffic accident or maybe a car crash, the first thing is safety is of key priority, is safety, okay? And then when you get there, try to look to see obviously if there's any bleeding or if they are able to breathe. If they're not able to breathe, try to open up their airway. And if they are breathing, try to check around if there's any signs of any bleeding around. You try to apply direct pressure. If it's still not controlling, try to elevate the legs up or try to elevate the hands up just to like allow blood to flow back. And then the bleeding is being reduced. And then the last resort you can ever do, mostly if it's something like their whole knee is out, is to put like a tourniquet that will actually explain that you can actually get like maybe like a piece of cloth and then tie above. Mind you, either it's in the leg or it's in the hand. You can't put that on the neck or on the head. Okay, so with that being in place, help should already be on his way and they should be moving down to the hospital. So I don't know if those answers were clear or if there's anything anybody wants to add the person isn't clear about.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think it's also chipped in a few things here. It says the thing is emergencies are inevitable. First, do not be afraid. Settle your mind and figure a solution. Yeah. So many messages here, but I'll just someone has said Ezekiel said I am learning something new. I think we've read that one before. Um, we've read these ones too. Best from Abuja says nice one. All options well development. So David, I was going to ask you this too,
Yeah.
as maybe my wrapping up question, maybe one or two questions before. So what about the instances of fire incidents?
Okay.
By the time rescue comes to victims, they fume from the debris and everything, usually leave them freshly, still normal, not being born incident, but because maybe they inhaled a whole lot of advice also for this kind of situation, because we've also seen where people want to do rescue team, they also fall victim, and that's why sometimes fire service have always complained that most times they don't have they don't get 100% rescue from fire incidents, is because people are always advise that when there are emergencies, people should, open up spaces for people to breathe. So fire services have also complained seriously that when there is fire incidents, people are either coming to loot goods or properties from the building,
Yeah.
men from maybe climbing and pushing water in and all of that. What do you think people should also do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel. That's a very, very important question. Yeah. So fire emergency is a very, very common thing too that we also get as well. But so the first thing is, as I've always say, is safety. So from my own perspective, I wouldn't advise you to be a hero and go into a fire because number one, you are not trained about it. You don't exactly. So I know there's this tension of, oh, there's a child inside. We need to like go in and get the child out. There's this emotional thing built on. So if you still decide that, oh, it's still not safe, or you will take the risk which is not advisable, and then you go in such kind of situation which you are more you are more at risk, the best that you can do is most times is why help is coming from the fire service and all that is, once people come out from the fire, if you're able to rescue any victim out, because they've been inside, they've gotten two things, which is like the fire bonds, and then they've also inhaled smoke as well, and then they are at risk for so many things. Okay, so the first thing once they come out is to get a room temperature water. So you see people pouring them eggs, which is quite very wrong. people pouring them ice. That is very, very wrong as well. So what we do is that we use what we call the best, especially we call it like a room temperature water. So it's not hot, it's not cold. It's what I would say, okay, it's warm or it's tepid, something like that. So you should get that kind of warm water, okay, and then try to pour it around to like irrigate around their body. Mind you, do not put things like egg. I know it's a very common practice. Most times they get egg, they get snake, they get snail. That secretion from snail. I think some people use this kind of thing. They just rub it around. Some get salt and start pouring salt. They're like, oh, rub it salt will actually help it. These are like some things that even if need for people say it works, but there is medically not something you would advocate, because once there's like burns, there's like a breach of the skin, the person is prone to more infection. So you put in things like eggs, it's actually not going to be helping. And then if you put things like eyes, you would end up even burning them more, because people really don't know that eyes also burns. They think it's only more of like fire that burns. So if you want to try it, and if you put like leave an ice block on your hand for like up to 20 to 30 minutes and then take the ice block off, you see that your hand will actually look very sore. So those things can burn. So what would I advise is get them under the tap if it's possible, because it's quite like the tap water is more warm compared, because of course it's a very hot weather back home and all. So once you get them down under the tap, allow the water run over them. So try to like irrigate them, try to like cover them a little bit, because they would be a bit cold, because given that your skin actually helps to also regulate your temperature. So irrigate them, get something very light like a wrapper, just cover them, and they should be on their way to hospital, so that like a doctor can actually examine the burns and start giving them treatment. Okay, so that's like the best thing you can do. Then the second part is the smoke they've inhaled. So you see them coughing things that are black, also vomiting things that are like black, or they've actually inhaled much of soot. So there's really no much things you can do giving like its first aid. Okay, so if it was something more of like an ambulance service is coming in, there are ways they can help them breathe. They could kind of like intubate them, or take over their airway. But given this kind of situation, the best thing you can do is to just further reduce things that can make them choke, like removing tight fitted clothes, giving them enough space for them to be able to breathe, trying to open up their airway by that head stitching. If that's the best thing you can do, placing them in a recovery position and taking them to the hospital as fast as possible, because as a first aider, you don't have oxygen to give them, but you can actually give them a lot of space for them to be able to breathe at least while help is coming. And then make sure you get that water, like that warm water, like trying to pour it around them, trying to more of like irrigate them, to irrigate the part of the injury. I think that's the best thing you can do. So I think the greatest thing among everything I would say is you not doing some wrongful practices is even one of the best thing you can not the best thing you can do, because if you are putting things like egg, snail secretion, salt, I think it's even more of like you are doing more harm than good, because the long-term effects when they get back won't really be a nice thing. But some people can actually argue that, oh yeah, I had burns one time, I put egg, it worked for me. Yeah, but it worked for you. It's actually, these are actually very wrongful practices, because you could actually end up contaminating those wounds. They could give them more of infection once they get back to hospital, and then you slow down the process of them recovering back. So doing little sometimes is doing much. So you don't have to pour everything you have on them. Okay, so as simple as putting them under the tap, or getting tap water and just pouring it on them, just to a bit cool the body more, is the best thing you can do in those kind of cases. And then removing tight fitted clothes, reducing crowd around them, because that crowd is very, very important, because most times you see most people just come to either look out of empathy, or you see people just coming around to like maybe take pictures or so, which is something that I would say is wrong. It's always best to put your phones away once there's like an emergency, and see the best thing you can do. As simple as trying to mobilize vehicle to come and take these people down to the hospital. It's so much that you are doing at that point, because you're actually trying to get more help for them to get to where they can get appropriate care. So you trying to bridge that gap between them and the hospital is actually a lot of things. You don't have to do the wrong things, just so it shows that you've done a lot. Okay. Yeah. And then on that I also talk about is for fire, most times most times when fire actually happens, there's this phenomenon whereby I think most times most doors won't open and stuffs like that. Like even a door that actually opens before, like most people do say that those doors most times it's quite very difficult, not because of like there's really reduced kind of visibility because of the smoke that's actually like trying to encroach those kind of spaces. So it's always good that prevention is also something that we should also preach before things happen. So things like installing smoke alarms in buildings, things like I think most times in most organizations they have what we call a mustard point, whereby if things happen, everybody can just assemble down there and they can get down there as well. Then also something people use is like they say this blanket thing actually helps as well, because most time people they've thrown blankets to people inside some buildings that have fire, like some wet blanket, and they've been able to use that wet blanket to cover themselves, and they've been able to find their way out. So it's also something too that is quite helpful and is quite safe, because at this point you're actually throwing in the wet blanket and you are not even entering the fire as well, putting yourself at more risk. So stuff like that are also very important thing one can do, and we still keep preaching more for prevention more um, than cure. Things more of like installing fire alarm, installing fire extinguishers as well in buildings as well. It also helps as well. And then things like pouring, I think it's not Omo and water in fire. It's actually a very wrongful practice. So most people don't know about it. They will tell you that once there's fire, put Omo in water and then pour it. It's actually going to reduce the fire. I think even evidence have shown that even that Omo without water, which has even increased the gravity of the fire even more than even reducing the fire. So things more of like trying to get a fire extinguisher. Also, a very common thing too is like when things that let me say you were like cooking and then you were trying to fry, and then the next thing that the frying pan just goes on fire. The best way is as well as like is as good as covering the frying pan can actually help to reduce that fire, because when you cover the frying pan, you starve the fire of oxygen, and so once you start the fire of oxygen, the fire won't actually go up. You get so as well as like so if you have something like that you were trying to fry and then the whole either the pot or the frying pan just catch fire, so you don't have to start pouring water on it. I think the water will actually encourage even the fire more. It's very tricky, because that's like the first impulse that you go for. Like there's this fire, like you were frying and the frying pan just come up and then you just get water and just pour. You see the fire would even get up more. So the best is like just get a cover and cover it up. So it's actually something that helps. It's like a very fast thing, but it's just something that most people won't think about once there's this fire there. So trying to starve the fire of oxygen actually helps to reduce the fire. Then think things like fire from electrical cables. Let me say like there's this spark on the wall and all that. So those kind of incidents too. I think there's a special fire extinguisher for those kind of for electrical fire. So knowing the right extinguisher to use for the right fires is also a very important thing, because if you use the wrong extinguisher for the fire, you can actually end up increasing that fire in all. But it's very simple thing we can do for mostly things that has to do with like when you are like in the kitchen and those things, or like trying to cover up the fire. That actually helps a whole lot. So today, if you didn't learn anything, as simple as trying not to pour water and omo when you see a fire is actually something that is you should actually take home as well. Then someone is asking, what is your advice for a basic household first aid kit and what basic household items? Yeah, this is a very good thing. Like it's advisable that every house, every organization, as far as you guys are more than 5, there should be a first aid box. Okay. So the first aid box, it does not have to be this pretty thing. So it's what you call it, even if it's from a box that is being constructed with a wood, you could have that, and it could contain basic things like cotton wool, like spirits, like iodine, like plaster. I think paracetamol is also part of, like, some people do put paracetamol in case you're having like a mild headache. Well, plus or minus, the most important thing is that you should have like cotton wool, you should have plaster, you should have iodine. I would even say your first aid box should also contain a bottle of water, because that water can do a lot of things. So take for example, there's like a chemical splash into somebody's eyes as well. that water can actually help to you to like try to like irrigate the eyes, to like wash it out, or there's like a fire burns, that water can actually help as well too. So, and things like fresh wound that are like bleeding, I won't advise you to put spirit. It's something that is commonly done. It's a very wrong thing doing something like that. So most people just see like a fresh injury, and the first they're like, oh, get spirit. They just pour spirit on a very fresh wound. So the first thing you do, most of all those fresh wounds, is just pour water to irrigate it and then apply direct pressure with a clean cloth. So I think that's like the best thing you can actually do, rather than pouring spirit, because if you pour spirit to actually even make it bleed out more, because given that spirit is harsh. So what can I use spirit for? So spirit is more for cleaning old wounds. So something that has happened maybe 1 day, 2 days when it happened, and then it's just more of like a disinfect, a kind of like a, it's more of like an antiseptic kind of thing for like cleaning wounds. Okay, so it's not like you pouring spirit on a fresh wound. It really won't help. So the best thing you can do is just get the legs on that tap, allow water like flow through it, and then apply direct pressure. If it's not bleeding, you don't have to apply direct pressure. I think just putting it under the tap, it's something that's quite rightful. Then stuff like snake bite, scorpion bite, I think there's like a whole lot of things around it. People trying to use knife to peel out the place to bleed out more. Those are like wrong practices. People, I know most people will say chew onions. I think drink palm oil. Things are like some common things, which is very, very, I'll say it's quite wrong doing those kind of things, because there's really no scientific explanation for all these things, even if there's these traditional strong beliefs around them. So if someone has like a snake bite or like a scorpion bite, the first thing you do is to get it under a tap water. You see that very important water can be, because the first thing we're trying to do is to reduce the risks of contamination. So putting this in other water would actually aid in taking out the toxin, because as far as it is actively bleeding, most times, most of these bites you see, most snake bites, it's kind of like bleeding out. There's this the bleeding actually is actually helping to expel out some of the toxins as well, even if it's not so much. Then things like tying above the parts, it's actually something too that is not encouraged, because most people will say when you tie the leg, it will limit the poison from going to the heart and all that. It's still something that is still proven, like putting a tourniquet. And that's one. Then number two is that you tying this person's leg. So there's actually like a recommended time you can leave a tourniquet on someone, because when you tie somebody's leg so tight, you are cutting out blood supply. And if you leave that thing up for more than 2 hours, you can end up doing more harm, because if you cut off blood supply from their leg, you end up you end up keep putting that person at risk of probably even losing that leg, because you starve the leg of all the nutrients to be getting. So 2 hours of cutting out blood supply for somebody's leg is quite a very serious thing. And then most times the time it will take you from the place where the snake bite happened down to the hospital can take like maybe 3 hours, 4 hours with traffic, or 6 hours. Mind you, the tourniquet or the rope you tied on the person's leg is still there for those long amount of hours. You can imagine. So you've actually like cut out a lot of blood supply from that leg. The person may end up even losing that legs, and then there's a lot of things that have been built up, breakdown of muscles, that can actually put the person at so many other risks medically. So what I would advise is snake bites, take the site to put the site under a tap, try to make sure the tap water runs over it, wash the part very well, like just keep on like so you could use like maybe like this mite kind of soap. You could use them to like wash the affected area, and then you should get this person to the hospital as soon as possible. So things like giving them palm oil to drink, it can actually do even more harm than good. Chewing onions and all those parts. So scientifically, those things have not been actually proven to do much, even if people do that. So doing little can actually be doing more for these people. So I think that's like a good point if it's well understood. Anyone has any more questions?
Okay.
Yeah.
I think our viewer from Kenya said was agreeing with you on a point you made. He says that's so true about the oil. Thank you for that tip about starving fire of oxygen. I also noted that down. When you say people mix detergent and water and feel that, if I hear that a lot of times, that just mix it and pour, that you don't even need fire extinguisher.
Um,
It's
very
sometimes some myth that people have over all of that. Um, King Courage also here says, thank you, Mr. David, for this lovely information. It's really nice to be here. And thanks, Shagalinku. Thank you to King Courage. Ijoma Umejesi says, we learn every day. Sure, we'll learn every day. And you can't be with David and not learn something new. Uh, so many messages, but thank you so much. Too. There's so many questions I really need to ask, and I'm really happy you had even touched on some, because gets burnt by hot water, and you see people, mothers rushing to this snake bite you talked about. People will just tie that leg, and for later they will say, truly it's the snake bite that caused it, and they wouldn't. But on a final note, what would always uncomfortable when every time, like you said, people just use. When did we lose our humanity for that person lying on the floor is to save that life rather than snapping pictures and being the first person to break the news?
yeah.
What's the final word of advice to everyone?
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel. So, one way I would advise is we should try and like do better. So, I think the best way of doing better is learning from past mistakes. So, it's always been a culture whereby accident happens, people try taking pictures, no help gets to the victim, nobody's even mobilizing how to get them away, and it has actually not helped. So, I think this is like a clear indication where to make us do better. So, I would advise people to just do better. So, rather than trying to take that picture, put your phone away. It's very, very unnecessary. Just think about, if this was my brother, or if this was my sibling, or this was my parent, would I be holding my phone at that moment? It's something we should ask ourselves, trying to snap, because these are like people's relatives, these are people's like loved ones, and also ask yourself, will I be doing that? So once there's an emergency, put your phone away. Try much to see how you could help. If you are not helping, leave the scene or the incident. So rather than standing around trying to form a crowd, you're actually limiting the person's oxygen that they would even take in. So if you're not getting help or so, you should either stand from afar, leave the scene, or try to help. So with this few, I think yeah, we should just do better. I think it's the best thing, because it's really not helpful whereby most of these cases happen, and over again, people have died while on camera, not once, not twice. Even when people have convulsions, people are snapping pictures, which is very wrong. Yeah, so I would advise, yeah, we just do better, and then we should also try to learn these basic skills. So as simple as like Mr. Emmanuel is actually doing now, trying to expose sections for people to like learn basic things they can do. These are like very simple things that you don't need any equipment. It's just your hand. Most times it's just your hand, a piece of cloth, a piece of material. You just do one or two things can actually make the big magic. And even as a trained paramedic as well, even if I'm outside, I don't have anything to work with, I will still do these basic things that another member of the public would still do, because that's all you have in your disposition. So it's more of like recognizing how to do CPR, how to position somebody in the recovery position, how to do a head chin lift just to open up their airway. Yeah, and how to apply direct pressure and elevate a part that is bleeding. These are like quite very helpful things. Yeah, but always remember, safety, 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 safety. Your safety is always first. Don't try to be a hero. Always think about your safety first. Yeah. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Okay, thank you so much. So finally, what we do on our show, every of our guests, we give them a minute to, we know wherever they are right now in their career, in their personal organizations, family and friends who have always been supportive. So we give you an appreciation to everyone that has been there as a support mechanism. So, David, you have one minute.
Sorry if I didn't get that last part, Emmanuel. It seems like you want me to. Could you come over that again? Thank you.
Okay, so I say on our show, we give the last 1 minute to our guests to say a word of appreciation to their
Uh,
support mechanisms, colleagues and friends, organizations who have always been there for them, whether in their career or in their personal lives as they walk through the journey of life. So, would like you to use that opportunity to greet as many people you want to appreciate.
oh, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I want to appreciate you, Emmanuel, for this opportunity to come share knowledge. I believe someone must have learned one or two things, even if it's not the correct thing, but more of like learning things that are wrongful practices, even if they didn't get anything from inside. So thank you very much, Emmanuel. Secondly, I want to thank Lifesavers NG, a non-profit back in Nigeria. I think they provided me the platform to be able to volunteer and teach this CPR and first aid skills. And also, I want to finally thank you for being here to learn, to improve, and thankful to you that you are going to use this knowledge to help either a loved one or a family member or an unknown victim. Thank you very much.
Oh wow! Thank you so much, David. It's really been a pleasure having you on the show. I want to sincerely thank everyone who joined us. Our viewer from Botswana talking about people who sent in messages from Abuja, Kano, all over. We see the names and we see them. Thank you so much who also dropped comments. Thank you so much. The videos will still be here for you to watch, so you can share them. Just share the links on YouTube and Facebook. And remember to also subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our social media handles, so that you the next episode. Once again, thanks to David, all the way from the United Kingdom. My name is Ambassador Emmanuel Gabari. This is urging you all to stay safe and please drop that phone and save that life. There's no award for breaking news. And like David said, what if it's your relative? Would you be snapping selfies and all of that? All life matters. Thank you all so much for joining us. Till we see you on the next episode, have a beautiful, beautiful day and bye bye.